Chapter 10. In church, I fingered the lace on my dress while the preacher talked about forgiveness. Funny he should bring that up right then. I thought about my midnight escapade. I thought about the words on the statue, where there is injury, pardon. And I thought a lot about Billy Riggs. Dad stayed after church to meet with the deacons. At home, I changed into overalls and set the table for Sunday dinner. Mother and I hummed in the kitchen, the closing hymn still in our ears. I peeled the potatoes, struggling to make the peelings as thin as possible. Mother smiled her approval. Later, she would drain them, add fresh water, and put them on the stove to boil, while her chicken sizzled in a frying pan. Dad would mash them into a mound of white fluff just before we sat down to eat. My part of the chores done. I strolled across to pick some of Mrs. Burtz's flowers. Colors burst beside the walks. Petunias, purple, red, and white, edged the yard. Against the white latticework of the porch, Mrs. Burtz's showy peonies bore giant blossoms of pink and lavender. How she must miss them. The last bright yellow tulip bowed on its stem. I stooped to snap it. Sounds came from behind the Burtz's house, faint, high-pitched whimpers. Curious, I walked to the backyard and peered into the dark space under the porch. This had been my old hideaway a long time ago, before the war, before the gardens. I'd almost forgotten it. The Burts had moved in from the country right after my 6th birthday. Mother made a welcome cake and a pitcher of tea. While she and Mrs. Burt sat talking in the kitchen, sipping the tea, I slipped out through the screen door and down the steps. I saw a gap in the lattice around the back porch. Out of my orneriness, I crawled inside and hid. I curled up in the cool dirt and fell asleep. When I stirred, I thought elephants were stomping on the porch above me. Adult voices drowned each other out. Legs showed through the lattice, hurrying back and forth. Someone yelled, "I found her!" And Jeff's head appeared, upside down, in the open space I had crawled through. I was fine then, but I felt like crying now as I remembered Jeff saying, "You're in trouble, Squirt." It was worth it. I had discovered the perfect place to sit with my dolls on days too hot for roller skating. I spent most of that summer under the porch. I must have been really small then. I couldn't see anything under there now. I turned to go, but the whimpers came again and something else. Shh, shh. I dropped to my hands and knees and squinted. "Who's here?" A rasping whisper answered me. "Get out!" I shuddered, but my curiosity won out. I flattened myself against the ground and inched forward on my elbows. "Who are you?" I whispered, since he had whispered. "None of your beeswax," he shouted at this time. "Billy Riggs," I shouted back. "I knew it." "Knew what?" "You broke Mr. Burtz's statue." "Get out." A pitiful yelp interrupted us. I squinted to see better and elbowed further in. A scraggly black animal stared at me through narrowed yellow eyes. "Is that a dog?" "None of your business, I told ya." "It sounds hurt." "Well, no kidding. I just about had him settled down till you came barging in. Now get out." "What's the matter with him?" "He's hurt, dummy. Said so yourself." "Hurt where?" I scooted further in. Billy was scrunched up beside the animal. "His back legs all cut up, maybe broken." "Oh my golly. How'd he get in here?" "Limped in. Found him in the alley for sunup." "You've been here all that time. Won't your folks be worried?" "Huh?" he said. Dog was in awful shape. Bleedin', near starved." "What did you do? Try to help?" "He just cried and shied away. I followed him here." "Oh my golly," I said again. He seemed to forget that he wanted me out and started telling me more. "I ran home for some old rags, brought this old coffee can for water. Alls I could do was rinse off his leg and wrap some rags around it." "I could get him some food," I said. "No need. I stole some hamburger from the icebox. Dogs can eat raw meat, can't they?" "Stole? Why didn't you just ask your mom?" "Huh?" The day before, I couldn't have imagined Billy being kind to anything, let alone a stray animal. I'd have thought he'd throw rocks at it. Why are you doing this? I asked him. He ain't done nothing. He just got hurt, that's all. Are you gonna take him home with you? Huh? It came out like a bullet. My old man would kick him down the well. Maybe there was a reason why Billy was so mean. The animal whined. I'll get my mother, I said. She knows Red Cross first aid. Wait here. Well, now, where would I be going? He sounded more relieved than defiant. Mother and I hurried back, carrying a first aid kit and a flattened pasteboard box. Mother's idea. Billy eased the dog onto the pasteboard and we pulled it out from under the porch. Billy elbowed his way out, blinking against the sunlight. When we saw the dog, we gasped. He was not a medium sized black dog, like I thought. This was a large animal, tall and long, but so skinny and matted that he had looked small when he lay in a heap under the porch. In the light, I could see patches of yellow brown fur through the mud and tar. Wolfie? I said, not quite believing. It is! It's him! I flung my arms around old Wolf's neck. Hey, don't hurt him, Billy said. He stroked the dog's ear. We gotta get you well, dog. I had never heard this kind of tone from Billy Riggs. Mother knelt. Can you two hold him still while I examine his leg? I held Wolfie's head and Billy put both arms over his rear. Mother probed the leg gently. I don't think it's broken, but it is badly cut. A deep gash on the foot. Teresa, hand me the mercurochrome. I rummaged through the kit and pulled out a small bottle of red liquid. When my mother treated my cuts, she painted the medicine on with a thin glass wand attached to the cap. For old Wolf, she poured it into the large wounds. He yelped but lay still and looked at us with wide eyes. Maybe he knew we were helping him. Mother wrapped his leg with a clean strip of white rag, split the last few inches of the cloth, and tied the two ends. We should wash him off with the hose, Billy said. Cool him down a little. Good idea, Mother said. Bring him over to our house. Billy knelt on the grass and stretched his arms out in front of him. Put him here, he said. Mother and I followed Billy's instructions without questioning. I took one end of the pasteboard, Mother took the other, and we lifted it, dog and all, onto Billy's outstretched arms. Are you sure he's not too heavy? We asked. Nah, he ain't but skin and bones. We followed behind as the meanest kid in town carried an ailing dog, like a baby in a cradle, across the street. Mother said, If you two can manage the dog, I'll go put the chicken on to cook. Would you like to eat with us, Billy? I just about died. I was impressed with Billy's care of the dog, but have him to dinner? What if the kids found out? We ran a few inches of water into Mother's washtub and lifted old Wolf into it. Billy gripped him by the loose skin behind his head while I held the hose. The cool water softened and rinsed away the crusts of mud. We couldn't do much about the tar. Dad came up just as we were patting old Wolf dry. Dad, look, it's old Wolf. We found him. I called when he was barely out of the car. Billy cleared his throat. Billy found him. Dad hurried up the walk and bent over the dog. Well, I'll be, he said, kneading the top of Wolf's head with his knuckles. Billy and I both talked at once, spilling out the story. The sheriff was right then, Dad said. What? Billy jerked, causing old Wolf to yelp. For an instant he looked, I don't know, panicked, I guess. Then he went all casual. About what? He said dogs find their way home, but I'd never known it to be from so far away. Oh, I hadn't thought to introduce Billy properly. Dad extended his hand. Good work. Billy, is it? I'm Alan Marks. Billy put his hand out looking awkward. Billy Riggs. I saw Dad's eyebrow lift. We'll ask Mother for a blanket, he said to me. We can bed the dog down in the workroom. We urged old Wolf to the back door. He lopped on three legs, even up the steps. He loped on three legs, even up the steps. In the workroom off the kitchen, he sank onto the thick cotton comforter Mother had already spread for him. We watched as he lapsed into sleep. The smell of frying chicken wafted in from the kitchen. I realized I was famished. Billy must have felt as starved as old Wolf. He had fed the dog, but I'd have bet he hadn't had anything himself since breakfast, if he had that. In spite of myself, I took his arm and led him into the kitchen. I didn't wait for him to protest. Mother was spearing golden brown chicken pieces with a two-pronged fork and lifting them out of the hot skillet. She piled them on an oval platter. You two can wash up at the sink. I'm glad you've decided to stay, Billy. Billy had decided no such thing. I can't. My folks will be expecting me. I knew that was not true, but tough Billy Riggs had suddenly turned shy. Mother sensed his discomfort. Well, at least take some chicken home with you. When Billy looked doubtful, she insisted. A whole chicken is much too much for the three of us. Billy stuck his hands in his pockets. He smiled with one side of his mouth and said, Well, ma'am, I reckon it would be hard to kill half a chicken. I watched him eye the chicken hungrily as my mother transferred a drumstick from the platter to a small plate. I noted with mixed guilt and gratitude that the three pieces she put on the plate did not include the wishbone. But I formed a wordless O when she pulled a length of waxed paper from the box, snapped it across the serrated edge, and laid it over the oval platter. She topped that with the red and white checked dish towel and reserved for church supper casseroles and handed the whole thing to Billy. You'll be coming back to see Wolf, I'm sure. You can bring the platter back then. Billy's eyes were wide. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. He backed out of the kitchen, both hands occupied with the platter, pushed the screen door open with one elbow, and was gone. Mother lifted the lid off a steaming pot and tested the potatoes with the long fork, humming as she worked. I looked at the small plate holding one chicken leg, one thigh, and one wing, and then at Dad. He lifted a shoulder and said, We can have an extra slice of bread if we're still hungry.